Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This channel is an educational channel and we try to delve into great theories of everything. All-encompassing theories, magnum opuses, tour de forces, earth-shattering discoveries, cosmologies and cosmogonies, and grand unified theories. Things that you can use in every aspect of your life to help you out with your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness, your formation of the holistic worldview, and your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health. We generally focus on the obscure and try to do deep dives. And today is our 28th video that we've done on the work called It's After the End of the World. Don't you know that yet? And this is about two groups of underground jazz musicians who kind of redefine their profession to again include the spiritual, the healing aspects of music. And I believe that their effect is kind of just scratching the surface right now, but that is going to blow up here in the 21st century. And we are in the epilogue, though, of this work, which is more autobiographical. And we're in the middle of it. We're talking about kind of getting turned on to various kind of esoteric, out of the way practices that kind of help to see a little bit more clearly about what's really going on. Kind of like a red pill, anatomy of red pilling. And so we'll start right here. Following that episode, along with other experiences in the public defender's office, in meditation, and in psychedelic states, I began to see clear evidence that people, including me, were not really making decisions in their lives, but really were falling into the cast of a drama that had already been written. People most often acted in a way that they fit into expectations, and it took a courageous act just to ignore those expectations and act in accord with the truth of the situation. I saw this courage on display only rarely, and I was unable to do this very often myself. When I did it, it was over considerable resistance from people who were threatened by my transgression. I also found that I would unconsciously do the same things to others, belittle people, and give flack to people who were trying to be real instead of conditioned, when realness threatened my comfort level. In these cases, I was giving consent to and enforcement of an unjust, one-sided system, just like the police had done to me. In this, I was part of a web of enforcement that was seamless. Each seam that was split and acted by an act of courage was isolated and then stamped out by intense pressure and, when needed, force. Even though, and perhaps because of, we are part of this web sustaining process every day, we do not see it happening. This phenomenon has been called cultural hegemony, false consciousness, brainwashing, mind control, conspiracy, and many other things. But I think that in the West, especially in America, this ailment is more accurately known as white man's disease. Just like the common understanding of the term, white man's disease refers to an omission, where it is normally known as an ability to run, jump, and dance. Here it is abstracted to the inability to see and hear. The technologically advanced society gave Americans the ability to enact violence without having to see the violence face to face. Technologies of space led to this not see state of mind. The attitude of the white man's burden, missionary diplomacy, do-gooders, and charity comprises the not here half of the American two-party crypto virtual totalitarianism. White men and others with the not here aspect of white man's disease have guilty consciences, so they nobly try to help the less fortunate. Ultimately, they really are trying to help themselves, to make themselves feel better and superior and relevant, to heal their guilty consciences, so they fail to hear either those underprivileged people when they describe what they actually want, or to hear those underprivileged who offer help to them. The birth of this not see, not hear form of white supremacy, as it formed in the 19th century, before and after the Civil War, has marked the end of the world also. The end of history for the West, for it ensured by a skewed or twisted alignment of reality that the West, and maybe the world itself, would ultimately run out of gas and run off a cliff as it perished. My historical, legal, and political studies let me know that these events were set in motion, but I personally did not figure out that it was after the end of the world until July 1991. Findings from my own experiences led me to study historical phenomena to discover that individual experience was also common history. When I realized that it was indeed after the end of the world, I experienced deeply ambivalent feelings. First, I was totally liberated. I could not say that I had found the truth, but I knew I was quite a bit closer to it than I had been. I didn't have all the answers, but at least now I had the questions. My new worldview was a synthesis of many different kinds of alternative beliefs, but it was also finally coincident with my experience, and each new experience was only affirming these beliefs. On the other hand, my so-called awakening was an awakening into a nightmare, a world where my very beliefs and even experiences were invalidated and ridiculed by friends, family, loved ones, and authority figures. I was frequently warned that I was losing my mind, that I was getting into trouble, that I was immature, irresponsible, and that I needed to get back to reality. Altogether, however, I noticed that these people were not living according to what they were telling me to do. I still had my doubts, but I had discovered how to see through many untruths and inconsistencies in my midst. But I also had to turn the mirror back on myself. I was the one who was drunk and disorderly. I was the one who lost his temper. I was the one who jeopardized lives, including my own, by drunk driving. Not often, because I had no car. I began to realize that I was walking in the footsteps of a number of infantile adult men I knew in my suburb, who still lived for the kicks they got out of alcohol, but couldn't take care of business with their families and only got through their jobs by promising themselves a stiff drink when they got home. I did not rectify all of these problems at once, but I began to sow a seed that was painfully planted in me. I realized that some changes would have to be made, and that some of them would be painful. I realized that I had dug myself into a deep hole and that I would have to undo a lot of things and sacrifice a lot of things. So it was fittingly after the end of the world for me as an individual, even as I discovered the truth about the society. After all, I was a product of that society. In order to change things, I had to endeavor to stop being a product of this now defunct society and begin to start living truth in the best way I could. So, how was I going to ascertain reality? I had to go with what I trusted with my heart. So far, the main things I believed in that I could trust were mathematics, endurance training, deep explorations into music under high consciousness, and forays into cannabis and psilocybin. These last had given me breakthroughs, but my use of them was limited enough to need more information, and this is what led me to books by Carlos Castaneda, among others. Many have since claimed that Castaneda's anthropological accounts of Native American shamanism and sorcery were fraudulent, but regardless, he still gave me a different model of how to approach not recreationally entheogen experiences, and helped me to be sure that I was not mistaking or misplacing the plant's significance. These readings showed me that through the different consciousness that psychedelics gave us, we were open to a separate reality that not only differed from, but also superseded the mundane reality. The Don Juan character in the Castaneda books was a wise man who lived life on a higher, more real plane, even though Carlos often condescended to him because Carlos could not see. Don Juan was a warrior who forced himself to live a higher discipline and responsibility level so that he would be tuned into the higher secret forces of the universe. These stories had me fascinated and pursuing other accounts of warriors. I read Dan Millman's The Way of the Peaceful Warrior and several other New Age books, and I read more hardcore treatments of Eastern adepts and Eastern religion. During this time, law school was all but irrelevant, and I staggered my way across the finish line to graduate in December 1991, just before I turned 24. I began to think of my running from this warrior perspective too. I was a 400, 800 meter runner in college, and I figured that I could take that speed, take that speed and at the same time vastly increase my endurance. Then I could be more competitive at the longer distances, 10,000 meters and the marathon, and even ultra marathons, which really hadn't really kind of hit the scene by this time. But I figured in order to increase speed and endurance, I'd have to increase flexibility, which was a glaring weak point. I began to study and practice yoga and concentrated on increasing my endurance. Another element that I put into the warrior equation was tricksterism. I believed that with planning strategy, I could put myself into the condition where I could change the world by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time and convincing the media unknowingly to broadcast the censored behavior repeatedly to raise the consciousness of onlookers. I had concocted a few scenarios where this could occur, and I dealt with them in my imagination. To me, the essence of becoming a warrior related to patience and guts. I had to have the guts to reject openly, but not conspicuously, common knowledge, and also have the willingness to wait until I developed a greater ability to express my alternative ideas. Foremost among these goals was the ability to sacrifice. I had to decline opportunities to partake in a lot of pleasurable behavior that was also socially accepted, and to embrace sometimes painful behavior that was also socially outcasted. Two areas where I began to venture into abstention in 1992 and 3 were meat eating and automobiles. Through soul searching and entheogens, I began to realize that both of these behaviors were dangerous and damaging to my health and others. I would not only have to expend extra energy on my bike, but I was also a more conspicuous target for cars, buses, and other human aggressiveness. It also excluded me from many desirable but unsuitable situations, unsustainable situations. All that for the sake of trying to live according to the truth. I sometimes definitely wondered if it was worth it. In the short term, abstention caused me to be rejected by friends and family, who became quite worried about me. I knew that if I lived the truth, however, then I would eventually be able to demonstrate it to others, provided I could get them to pay attention. My path, however, did not go directly to the truth, though. I was a man in dire financial straits and needed to take a job in order to comply and survive. I had a law degree, but my grades and skills were so poor that I really only had one employment option: to work for a small firm out west near the mountains, who I believe only wanted me because I was a star athlete and black. They believed that my competitive nature would help me thrive in their dog-eat-dog world. In the alternative, they just wanted me to give credibility to their law firm's basketball team, which I did. On my half, I just took the position figuring the job would get me situated in the area, and then I could quit after I found something better. I had little intention of sticking with the job, but that little dissolved into none as I learned just what kind of work was involved. And this, again, is back in the early 90s. And my firm represented insurance companies who were rejecting claims by policyholders on technicalities, and representing police officers who were accused of police brutality. So I felt at that point, no thank you. I threw in the towel quickly, but didn't tell them. Instead, I maintained my competitive bent and chose to extract as much money from them as possible while doing as little work as possible. Consistent with several other jobs I've held over the years, I devised elaborate schemes for making it appear I was busy while doing absolutely no work. This was fairly easy, given that I had to leave the office to go to the public law library for research. I would sign out from the office at 10 a.m. to go to the library. Instead, I would go straight home, change out of my suit, go running, practice meditation, smoke cannabis, and then catch a matinee or an afternoon baseball game, or listen to music, or all three, before calling my firm late in the afternoon to say that I was still at the library. I knew I was going to get caught for this sooner or later, but I didn't care, and I quit before it could happen. After my retirement from the legal world after about 2 months, I found myself face to face with the dubious job market in this city. Until the summer of 1992, I was naive to the sales, marketing, and speculation of the white-collar world. Over the next 12 months, I had several of these ridiculous sales jobs, pyramid schemes, and charity scams, which in effect turned my quest for truth into a mockery. At the same time that I was deciding to quit my law job, I was also realizing that if I was going to be a warrior, that I needed to adopt a secret mission. I could not consider myself a doctor, lawyer, salesman, clerk, or anything else so limiting and predefined. I needed to adopt a cosmic mission that described my purpose for the universe, or at least the galaxy, or at least the solar system, or at least the Earth. I had to conceive of my life in the same manner that we look at individual cells inside the human body. I was an individual neuron inside the nervous system of the Earth Gaia, which was merely a modifier of the solar system, which in turn was a cell inside the Milky Way galaxy, etc. I felt that the more I tuned into this mission, the better I could be able to pull it off. So for me, it was of the utmost importance that I figure out who I was so that I could figure out what to do. There were several ways that I went about this. First, I attempted to purify my body so that I would get more and more accurate messages from my subconscious, my microorganisms. Second, I felt that myself had drifted away from my true self over the course of the years through programming and conditioning, but that I could connect more closely with my true self by going back further in time before many of these conditionings to determine what I was drawn toward or attracted to in my childhood, imagination, before discourses about money, fame, power, security, vacations, a nice car, romance, marriage, children, and a house in the suburbs had entered my head. I felt that my true gifts for humanity and the universe were reflections of the gifts of my parents, that I could extend to a higher level. I reincarnated into my parents' lives because they were the people who could teach me the most negative or positive about my mission, what I came here to do. My process in figuring this took more than a year, and I'm still fine-tuning it today, weighing and balancing all of that I did well, all of the things that I liked to do, all of the things I had a good background in, and all of the programming and conditioning that I had taken into trance states and imagination that I had convinced myself that I should do. My mother was a teacher, school administrator, now a professor, an educational consultant. My father was a chemist. My father was also an officer in the Air Force. And my mother was a strategizer of school curriculum. My dreams and fantasies, however, had me pursuing sports stardom. All of us growing up, even friends who were mediocre in sports, held out the dream that somehow we could make our livings playing sports. Gradually, especially after high school, my male friends and I were gradually driven to adjust those dreams to the occasional intramural game and living our dreams vicariously through our children and through professional sports stars. Gradually, we were expected to impart this sports religion to our children, ensuring a competitive child who eventually learns to perpetuate the religion. I knew that this narrative in my head was greatly flawed. I also knew that there was a kernel of truth, a kernel that I could use to sustain a connection between the world even as I fell off the deep end. Beneath all of the stardom, the steroids, the sports bars, the stadiums, and endorsement contracts, I knew there was a nonviolent consensual core to competition that was more authentic. I believe that competition enabled people to perform at a high level, much higher than in practice. If a person envisioned competition as an opportunity to get better rather than just to win or lose, or not take win or lose personally, not hold on to the results, but just try to do one's best, then I believed competition could be a healing agent. The warrior competitor had to look at their opponent, not as the enemy, but as a consensual partner with an implicit agreement to give their absolute all as a show of respect to the other competitor. Another approach was that the warrior competitor had a pact with the Creator to do her best. So I knew that athletic competition in some way was going to be a part of my mission, not in the conventional sense, but a nonviolent sense. Again, I found that it was necessary to adhere to nonviolence and nonviolation, or the competitive aspect would run amok. But I also found that nonviolence was not anti-violence. There was still a time and place for violence, only just much less than is socially acceptable. I finally decided that my secret mission was to be a, quote, runner, which is what I am still today. Being a runner is not to be taken literally necessarily. To fit in the whole scope of the running mission, I use my imagination, especially since I can't really be a world champion runner now, much less my whole life, without achieving superhuman feats of strength, endurance, and longevity. I still feel that I can teach myself to run faster and farther than is humanly possible, even without the full manifestation of secret powers. I often see people around town who tell me that they were inspired when they saw me running the other day. Positive feedback for my mission. So some of this mission has to do literally with running and some with competition. The mission also has to do with being a runner in the sense of being a messenger. In many ways, my studies have taken me into uncharted waters, individually but also planetarily. I've done a lot of digging and delving into topics that are almost unknown by the human beings in this or any other time period. So I see it as a mission to document my secret knowledge and techniques that I have uncovered as a messenger, My runner warrior mission encompasses the last 32 years or thereabouts. Initially in 1992-93, when I was formulating this mission, the plan was to go at it for 20 years. And then if the planetary situation was still status quo, I could go back into the consensus worldview and get a real job, have a family, get married, etc. Obviously, running fits under athletics, another name for track and field, a sport widely recognized, but the hidden or occult is also operative because I have to use secret esoteric powers in order to be the kind of runner I need to be. I'm not a good enough runner just based on my natural ability. I had to go deeper through breathing exercises, yoga, healing medicine, hypnosis, visualization, energetic alchemy, alternative consciousness, sorcery, and just, dogged willpower to just keep going. Whatever comes up in order to strive for the impossible. Steroids not included, or legal steroids only. History played its part in that it helped me finance my training through its meager stipends. I guess this refers to going back to graduate school. While it appeared as if I was a full-time student in history, it was largely a way to make enough money to stay healthy for warrior runner training. History had a dual purpose too, for it was also for use as a cover for deepening my studies on the occult. Given that the topic that I chose was founded upon Sun Ra and several other these underground jazz musicians, it involved a lot of mystical and occult practices. So I could research just about anything I wanted to under the pretext of context. I studied and tried to experience several kinds of esoteric practices with varying success rates. ancient Egyptian sacred geometry, Native American shamanism, Euro witchcraft, Haitian and New Orleans and voodoo, Taoist alchemy and yoga, including I Ching, Buddhism, especially Vipassana, Rastafarianism, Indian yoga, Mayan cosmology and anthroposophy, reciprocal system. I have read, studied, and practiced rare texts that I had to dig for in all of these topics and more. Most important, I studied the connections between African Americans and hidden spirituality. Graduate school, ironically, gave me the chance to allow virtual full-time attention to extending my spiritual practices. And then in addition to this is the Sun Ra's own mission in life, an extension of that. Sun Ra's mission, other than, conducting this jazz orchestra, was to find the true meaning of the Bible. Okay, I think we'll stop there, and we'll pick it up tomorrow and see how he does. Okay, have a great day. And if you want a copy of the discography for this work, that will turn you on to the recordings, all the primary sources for this work, all the recordings coming from like the 60s and 70s. Send me $1 or more on Venmo or Cash App or Revolut, and I'll send it to you. Also, if you want a whole copy of this, it's after the end of the world, don't you know that yet? $10 or more to me on Venmo or Cash App, I'll send it to you. Pretty much just reflecting the amount of effort it takes me to send these PDFs kind of one at a time. Okay, so have a great day and hope to see you tomorrow.